What if the reason people don't respect you isn't because you're not smart enough or strong enough, but because you talk too much? You explain, defend, try to be understood, but the most powerful man in the room rarely speaks. He enters and the energy shifts, not because he demands attention, but because his presence commands it. A wolf doesn't bark to be feared. He shows up, and the forest falls silent. That's not arrogance, it's power. In a world addicted to noise, the Stoics mastered what weak men fear most: silence. Because silence reveals who's grounded and who's not. It unsettles those who rely on performance. It commands without begging. So how do you become the man who doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, and doesn't react? In this video, you'll learn how to use strategic silence to gain respect, influence energy, and protect your power without saying a word. Like the video, subscribe, and let's begin.
Number 1.
Master yourself first. Before you can command any room, before fear, respect, or influence, you must first conquer the storm within. Most men never do. That's why they chase approval. That's why they explain themselves. That's why they collapse under pressure. But the man who commands without words, he has mastered one thing first: himself. Marcus Aurelius didn't rise to power because he was loud. He became the most respected emperor of Rome because he ruled himself before he ruled an empire. His meditations weren't motivational speeches. They were a journal of war against ego, weakness, and emotional chaos. Every day he wrote, not to sound wise, but to stay grounded. He knew the enemy wasn't out there. It was in here. Most men try to control outcomes, control people, control perception, but Stoicism flips that script. You have power over your mind, Marcus wrote, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. In other words, you don't control the room by dominating it. You control the room by not being dominated by it. Picture this. You walk into a room full of tension. People sizing each other up, speaking too quickly, laughing too loudly. But you sit down in silence. Not stiff, not withdrawn. Relaxed, still. Grounded. Your breath is slow. Your eyes scan, not like a predator, but like a man with nothing to prove. That breaks the pattern, because most people are ruled by impulse. They fidget. They overtalk. They perform, but you move like still water. You see everything. You respond to nothing. And that silence, that presence, it unsettles people. They start to respect you not because of what you say, but because of what you don't say. Seneca once said, "No man is free who is a slave to his emotions." If someone insults you and you react, they own you. If someone ignores you and you chase them, they own you. The moment you react without control, you give up power. You become readable, predictable, Now contrast that with Nelson Mandela. Decades in prison couldn't break him because he mastered the one thing no prison can touch: his inner world. When he finally walked free, he didn't shout. He didn't seek revenge. He walked out in silence, and the world felt quiet with him. Epictetus called this the highest freedom, not needing anything outside yourself to feel steady. When you walk into a room carrying your own approval, your own peace, your own code, people feel it. They mirror it. You shift the energy without effort. That's not weakness. That's rare power, and it's not built in the spotlight. It's built in solitude. You don't develop this control in front of others. You develop it in silence. When you sit with discomfort without flinching, hear criticism without defending, and let go of the urge to be right. You practice until stillness becomes your default, until people feel your presence before you speak. But mastering yourself is just the beginning. Because once you stop reacting and start radiating, what happens next is even more powerful.
Number 2.
Strategic silence and its psychological power. Once you've mastered your internal world, the next step is learning how to use silence as a tool. Not just to protect your energy, but to control the psychological landscape around you. This isn't about withdrawal. This is about strategic stillness, the kind that speaks louder than words. Most people talk to fill space. They explain, over-defend, or speak just to be heard. The Stoic does the opposite. He speaks only when it adds value. His words carry weight because his silence came first. Here's what most men don't realize. Silence makes people uncomfortable. It forces them to confront their tone, their behavior. When someone insults you and you say nothing, that silence becomes a mirror. They see themselves, and often they don't like what they see. Elizabeth Kenny once said, "He who angers you conquers you." The Stoics would agree. Every time you respond emotionally, you surrender control. But silence, true, grounded silence, puts the weight back on them. It's not aggression, it's command. Here's a real example. In high-stakes meetings, powerful CEOs often speak last. Not because they're unsure, but because they're listening, letting others reveal their motives. When they finally speak, the room goes quiet. Their silence made the room lean in, and it gave their words weight. That's how the Stoic operates. He doesn't rush to respond. He observes, processes, and speaks when it matters. This makes him unreadable. And in a world obsessed with being understood, being unreadable is power. Moreover, withholding reactions gives you insight. You see how others behave without your input. You learn what triggers them. Your silence becomes strategy. And what you learn in that stillness, you can't unsee. This isn't detachment, it's clarity. The Stoic doesn't disengage from spite. He holds silence from strength. Not every jab deserves a response. Not every fool deserves an answer. So the next time someone baits you with a jab or insult, don't react. Hold the pause. Stay still. Let the silence stretch. Watch the shift. The energy tilts and you reclaim control. To illustrate, Abraham Lincoln once said, "Better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt." This wasn't cleverness. It was how he led. His pauses made others nervous, but they gave him clarity. Or consider Scipio Africanus, the Roman general who defeated Hannibal. He let opponents underestimate him. He listened, waited, and in that silence, learned what others missed. Silence isn't weakness, it's information. And here's something few men realize. Silence also builds anticipation. When you speak all the time, your words become cheap. But when you hold back, people start to wonder what you're thinking. They pay attention. Your restraint adds gravity to your presence. You don't need to raise your voice because your energy already fills the space. Seneca once wrote, "Speech is silver, silence is golden." In our strategic moments, silence isn't absence. It's presence amplified. It's choosing not to perform, not to defend, and still commanding the room through calm control. That's not just Stoic. That's unforgettable.
Number 3.
How presence speaks without words. Once you understand the power of silence, you begin to realize that true presence isn't created by words. It's shaped by energy. Your posture, your breath, your gaze, all of it speaks before your mouth ever does. The Stoics believed in aligning outer behavior with inner clarity. Because when your body is calm, your message is loud, even in silence. Most people walk into a room trying to take space. They talk too much, move too fast, or overcompensate through dominance. But the Stoic doesn't try to take space. He anchors it, not by being the loudest, but by being the most grounded. Let's take a real-world scenario. Imagine walking into a room full of egos. Everyone is posturing, trying to prove something. But you enter slowly. Your steps are deliberate. Your breath is steady. You make eye contact, not to challenge, but to acknowledge. That eye contact alone, when held with intention, sends a powerful signal. I see you clearly, and I have nothing to prove. Epictetus once said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." The man who walks into a room needing to impress is still trying to prove his worth. But the Stoic enters knowing his worth is non-negotiable. He doesn't need to convince. His composure does the talking. Consider James Baldwin. Though not a Stoic philosopher, he embodied the trait of quiet strength. In interviews, Baldwin would often pause before responding, keeping his tone steady even when confronted. He didn't match volume with volume. He matched tension with precision. That restraint made his words unforgettable. Similarly, in Roman history, there's Cato the Younger, a Stoic known for his unwavering principles and silence in political chambers. When others debated, he listened. When others begged for power, he sat still. His very presence unnerved opponents because they couldn't read him, couldn't provoke him, couldn't move him. That is presence without noise. But here's what separates mere silence from powerful presence: intention. You don't become unreadable by accident. You become unreadable because you've stripped away the need for validation, because you've practiced discipline in moments when no one was watching, because you know who you are and that knowledge radiates. So ask yourself, what does your energy say before you speak? Is your gaze restless? Is your body fidgeting? Is your presence asking for approval or standing on principle? Presence is not about dominating the space. It's about not being moved by it. The Stoic moves slowly, breathes deeply, and watches more than he speaks. And because of that, people notice him before he says a word. Moreover, presence is practiced discipline. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Even under pressure, the Stoic doesn't retaliate. His stillness is strength. Take Barack Obama. His presence was undeniable. He walked slowly, spoke thoughtfully, paused deliberately. He didn't rush to prove authority. He embodied it. That teaches us something. You don't need to fill space to command it. Calmness becomes magnetic, not because you seek attention, but because you don't need it. In a world addicted to noise, the one who moves slowly becomes the anchor.
Number 4.
Real-world power through restraint. Understanding presence is one thing, but applying it under pressure, that's where most men fall apart. Because restraint isn't natural. It's forged. And when your pride is poked or your ego tested, the urge to react is almost automatic. That's why the Stoics train for restraint like warriors train for battle. Because unchecked emotion is how power is lost. Seneca warned, the greatest remedy for anger is delay. That wasn't just philosophy, it was strategy. The pause between stimulus and response is where your strength is revealed. When you extend that pause, you take control not just of yourself, but of the situation. Picture this. You're in a meeting. Someone throws a passive-aggressive jab. Most people react. They defend. They explain. They look calm, but they're clearly rattled. The Stoic doesn't respond. He holds the silence. Maybe he smiles. Maybe he says nothing. But in that moment, the energy shifts. The attacker feels exposed. The room reorients. This is what psychology calls non-reactive dominance. It's not about overpowering, it's about being unshakable. When you don't flinch, people feel it, and it rewires the social dynamic in real time. Now consider Marcus Aurelius. As emperor, he faced betrayal, flattery, and pressure daily. But his journal reminds him not to be stained by the world, to act with reason, not impulse. That discipline is why he ruled an empire without being ruled by emotion. Or look at Mahatma Gandhi. His restraint was tactical. When insulted, detained, dismissed, he didn't meet fire with fire. He met fire with stillness, and that's what made him so dangerous. It's hard to fight a man who refuses to fight you back, because he's already conquered himself. And here's what's crucial. Restraint doesn't mean you're passive. It means you've chosen not to fight battles that drain you. It means you understand your energy is currency, and you spend it with precision. Every time you react, you give away your power. Every time you choose stillness, you strengthen it. The Stoics knew peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's composure within it. That's not softness. That's power under control. The more you practice restraint, the more clearly you see. While others react, you observe. Their tone, insecurity, desperation, it all becomes visible. And that clarity gives you edge. Because the man who sees clearly acts wisely. So next time you're tempted to defend yourself, pause, breathe, let silence do the talking. Because overreaction reveals weakness, but self-control, that's real power. And here's something even deeper. When you become known as the man who doesn't react, people begin to treat you differently. They think twice before crossing you. Not because you're aggressive, but because your silence holds consequences. You become a mirror, one that forces others to face their own instability. That's why Stoic restraint isn't just personal, it's social influence, it's leadership. In moments where others lose composure, you remain the reference point, the grounded presence that others lean toward. And that's how real power works. Not through noise, but through quiet gravity. To lead yourself is one thing, but to lead others without speaking, to shift the behavior of a room through restraint alone, that's mastery. And in the Stoic worldview, this is the goal. Not to be louder than chaos, but to remain unmoved by it, and therefore rise above it.
Number 5.
The psychology of strategic silence. Silence isn't just a lack of words. It's a psychological force. In the hands of the Stoic, silence becomes a weapon, a mirror, a filter, and a test. It reveals things no speech ever could. That's why the greatest thinkers and leaders throughout history understood one truth. The man who speaks the least is often the one who sees the most. First, let's understand the psychological response to silence. When someone pauses after being insulted, accused, or provoked, the human brain fills the gap. It starts questioning, what is he thinking? Is he offended? Is he planning something? That uncertainty creates discomfort, and discomfort creates attention. This is why silence is so powerful. It unsettles manipulators, disarms aggressors, and flips the burden of emotion back onto the other person. When someone lashes out and you respond with nothing, they're left to carry the weight of their own behavior. They're left alone in their noise. And that's the Stoic advantage. As Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Most people reveal too much, what they think, feel, intend, because they're uncomfortable with empty space. But the Stoic isn't. He uses that space. He lets others speak first. He listens not just to the words, but to what's underneath them. The tension, the contradiction, the need. Let's look at a real-world example. In negotiations, silence is a classic power move. Skilled negotiators often pause after an offer or statement. The less skilled party, uncomfortable with the gap, fills it, usually by revealing doubt, insecurity, or even better terms. Why? Because silence feels like pressure. And people relieve pressure by speaking. One of the best practitioners of this was Steve Jobs. In interviews and meetings, Jobs would often let silence stretch, sometimes uncomfortably. It wasn't a glitch. It was deliberate. It forced others to lean in, to question themselves, to overexplain. Meanwhile, he gathered information, controlled the tempo, and made every word that followed land harder. Moreover, strategic silence isn't about withdrawal. It's about observation. The Stoic watches carefully how people react, how they reveal themselves, how they contradict their words with their body. And because he's not busy performing, he sees patterns that others miss. He sees the game under the conversation. Cato the Younger, the Roman Stoic, was famous for this. In Senate debates, he would often listen in complete silence, letting his rivals exhaust themselves. When he finally spoke, he didn't just offer opinion, he dismantled illusions. Because he had heard everything, processed everything, and waited for the right moment. That's not silence as passivity. That's silence as timing. And here's the deeper truth. Silence doesn't just expose others, it reveals you. It shows how comfortable you are with uncertainty, with tension, with your own mind. Most people speak to escape themselves, but the Stoic sits with himself and grows sharper in the process. That's the paradox. Silence looks empty, but it's where the real work happens. So the next time you're in a heated moment or a high-stakes conversation, don't rush to fill the air. Hold the silence. Let others reveal themselves. Let discomfort work in your favor. The man who speaks less is not always weak. He's often just working on a different level. Ultimately, strategic silence is about control of yourself, of the moment, and eventually of the outcome. Because when you master the pause, you master the room. Number 6, presence and energy over words. In a world obsessed with saying something, Stoicism reminds us that real impact is made through what you radiate, not what you recite. True presence isn't built through vocabulary. It's shaped through energy. The kind of energy that enters the room before you speak and lingers long after you've left. Too often, people try to prove their value through speech. They talk fast, talk long, and talk loud, hoping someone will finally hear them. But as Marcus Aurelius said, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. When your values are lived, not preached, your energy becomes unmistakable. So what does this look like in practice? It starts with stillness. You enter a room not trying to be noticed, but carrying inner clarity. You're not performing. You're observing. Your movements are calm. Your posture is balanced and your eyes are alert but not aggressive. You don't have to dominate the space because you're already centered in it. And that calm, that quiet control becomes magnetic. In fact, science backs this up. Studies in psychology show that nonverbal cues, especially posture and eye contact, have more influence on how others perceive your power than words do. That means your energy is speaking before you do. And if it's aligned with intention, it speaks louder than any speech ever could. Take Frederick Douglass. He wasn't just a powerful speaker. He was a man of unmistakable presence. When he stood before hostile crowds, he didn't shout to be heard. He stood tall. He locked eyes. His message carried because his energy did. Even in silence, people felt his command. Or consider the Roman general Agrippa. He wasn't the most charismatic of speakers, but when he entered a military council, men turned toward him. Why? Because he led with results, not rhetoric. His calm under fire, his composure in crises, that's what made him magnetic. His energy earned trust. Furthermore, this principle extends beyond leadership into daily life. Your tone, your posture, your gaze, these are your first impressions. Most people use words to try and convince others of who they are. But a Stoic lets his behavior speak. He doesn't have to say, "I'm in control." He simply is, and others sense it. Here's the key. Energy doesn't lie. You can fake words. You can rehearse charm, but you cannot fake alignment. When your thoughts, values, and actions are congruent, your presence becomes undeniable, and people feel it before they can explain it. Moreover, the less you seek approval, the more power your presence holds. Because in that detachment, others feel your self-sufficiency. You're not waiting to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. That's what Stoicism trains you to do. To be so inwardly anchored that no storm, no noise, and no opinion can shake your foundation. In the end, remember this. It's not about the speech. It's about the state. You want to move people, don't just say something powerful. Be something powerful. Walk in with clarity. Sit in stillness. Speak only when the words come from alignment. That's when your voice becomes a force. That's when your silence becomes presence. And that's when the world starts listening before you say a word. Number 7, the echo of mystery. There's a reason why some people linger in your mind long after they leave a room. It's not always because of what they said, but because of what they didn't say. Stoicism teaches that mystery is power, that withholding isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Because when people can't fully read you, they're forced to reflect. They project, they obsess. The Stoic knows this. What you conceal often speaks louder than what you reveal. In a culture obsessed with constant updates, overexplanation, and emotional dumping, silence becomes rare, and rare becomes powerful. Consider the psychological effect of not replying to a message right away. The silence creates tension. The other person begins to imagine, to interpret, to question. What's going on? Did I say something wrong? Is he ignoring me or thinking deeply? The truth is, you didn't do anything. Yet your silence is doing everything. This isn't about being manipulative. It's about being intentional. The Stoic doesn't use silence to play games. He uses it to create space for clarity, for reflection, for control. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." And sometimes the truest thing you can say is nothing at all. Let's bring this into the real world. Think of someone like Keanu Reeves. While not a Stoic philosopher, he embodies many of its traits: detachment, humility, and silence. He's known for long pauses, calm tone, and rarely oversharing. That aura of mystery doesn't weaken him. It strengthens him. People respect him not because they know everything about him, but because they don't. Or take the ancient example of Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism. It's said that Zeno would often speak little in public forums, only offering words when they were most needed. He believed that wisdom wasn't shown in how much you speak, but in how much you withhold. Furthermore, mystery has a psychological echo. It stays with people. When someone leaves a conversation with questions rather than answers, those questions echo. They return in moments of silence. That's what the Stoic understands. Silence can haunt. Not because it's empty, but because it's unresolved. And unresolved energy is the most powerful kind. It creates a loop in the human mind. It makes people replay what you did or didn't say. That's influence without performance. That's emotional gravity without noise. So how do you apply this? Stop explaining so much. Let your actions speak. Let your energy fill in the blanks. Don't always answer immediately. Don't always clarify. Let your presence raise questions. Let your restraint invite curiosity. Here's the paradox. The less you reveal, the more others invest in understanding you. We value what's scarce. And in the marketplace of attention, mystery is rare currency. The Stoics didn't chase attention. They drew it by being composed, unreadable, self-contained. Seneca wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind." If someone keeps thinking about you, not because you talked endlessly, but because you said just enough, your silence has shaped their thoughts. That's not distance. That's impact. Ultimately, mystery isn't about pretending. It's about presence without need. You don't need to be understood by everyone. You don't need to be decoded. The Stoic man doesn't live to be seen. He lives to be solid. And that solidity, when it walks out of the room, echoes longer than any speech could you. In a loud world, be the quiet question they can't stop thinking about. That's not silence. That's legacy. Number 8, the power of emotional stillness. What makes a man dangerous isn't his rage. It's his ability to stay calm while others unravel. This is one of the most overlooked Stoic principles. Stillness isn't the absence of pressure. It's the refusal to be ruled by it. While the world celebrates those who react quickly, speak loudly, and express emotions without filter, the Stoic chooses a different path. He becomes emotionally sovereign, and that sovereignty makes him unshakable. Let's start with the battlefield of daily life. Most people wear their emotions on their sleeves. A rude comment ruins their day. A moment of rejection sends them spiraling. They live at the mercy of every mood swing, every microaggression. Their peace is fragile. But the Stoic man, he's built differently. He doesn't deny emotions. He disciplines them. As Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And how do Stoics react? They often don't, at least not immediately. They pause. They reflect. Then, if necessary, they act with clarity, not impulse. This gap between emotion and expression is where power is born. Because anyone can shout, anyone can snap, but very few can sit in the storm and smile inwardly, untouched. Consider the example of George Washington. In many of his letters and battlefield accounts, it's clear he was a man of enormous emotional control. Even when betrayed by close allies or faced with devastating losses, he rarely reacted with outburst. His silence wasn't passivity, it was poise. It gave him the upper hand. It made men trust him, follow him, and fear disappointing him. That's the invisible gravity of composure. Moreover, emotional stillness protects your vision. When you're not consumed by every insult or praise, you can stay focused on what matters. You can lead without ego. You can listen without judgment. And you can respond with precision rather than projection. In contrast, a reactive man is always several moves behind. He's too busy defending himself to see the bigger picture. There's a moment in everyone's life where their emotional stability is tested. Maybe it's a breakup. Maybe it's a betrayal. Maybe it's public humiliation. And in that moment, everything inside you will want to react, to defend, to attack, to collapse. But the Stoic sees this as the proving ground, not to be unfeeling, but to remain unflooded. Like a deep ocean that stays calm even when storms rage above. And here's the paradox. When you show that you cannot be emotionally manipulated, people stop trying. They start respecting, sometimes they even start fearing. Because you've just demonstrated the rarest form of power, control over self. So the next time the world tries to drag you into an emotional war, don't fight, don't justify, don't defend. Breathe, observe choose your response like a master strategist. Remember, storms will come, but they pass. The question is, will you be grounded enough to outlast them? That's the Stoics' code. And in the long run, it's not the loudest man who leads. It's the calmest one who never loses himself in the noise. You don't need to raise your voice to be powerful, nor do you need to be loud to earn respect. And you certainly don't need to explain yourself to be understood. In a world drowning in noise, the most unforgettable presence is the one that doesn't try to be seen, but is undeniably felt. That's the essence of Stoicism. Not hiding who you are, but refining it, becoming so grounded, so clear, and so composed that your energy speaks louder than any words ever could. Marcus Aurelius didn't argue to prove a point, Seneca didn't shout to be heard, and Epictetus, once a slave, became a revered philosopher not because he demanded attention, but because he mastered himself. When you do the same, when you gain control over your emotions, your energy, and your presence, you stop chasing approval. You stop trying to impress. You simply show up and everything around you shifts. So the next time you feel the urge to react, explain, or prove your worth, pause and ask yourself, is this power or is this just noise? You weren't born to beg for validation. You were born to stand in silence, disturb the air with your quiet strength, and let your stillness do the talking. If this message resonates, subscribe for more Stoic wisdom, because real power doesn't shout, it echoes. Stay silent. Stay powerful. Stay stoic.